I found the brochure for a nursing home on the kitchen counter with my name circled in red marker. My daughter-in-law didn't just want me to cook for her 30 relatives. She was planning to evict me from my own house the second the party was over. But she didn't know I saw it. If you want to see how I turn the tables on my ungrateful family, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. My name is Eleanor. I'm 65, and for the past 3 years, I've been living in a nightmare disguised as a suburban dream. I thought letting my son, Brandon, and his wife, Chloe, move into my 4-bedroom home in Austin was a kindness. They were saving for a down payment, or so the story went. But somewhere along the line, the script flipped. I went from being the homeowner to the live-in maid, bankroller, and punching bag. It was a Tuesday morning when the final straw didn't just break the camel's back, it set the whole barn on fire. I was scrubbing egg yolk off a plate because Chloe couldn't stand the texture of doing dishes when she strutted into the kitchen. She was wearing those overpriced yoga pants she never actually did yoga in, tapping furiously on her phone with long, manicured acrylics. She didn't say good morning. She didn't ask how my arthritis was flaring up in the humidity. "Eleanor," she said, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness that always preceded a demand. "We need to talk about the logistics for next week. The reunion is going to be bigger than we thought." I froze, the sponge dripping soapy water onto the granite countertop, granite I paid for in 1998. "Reunion? Chloe, we talked about a small barbecue for your sister's birthday. What reunion?" She rolled her eyes, a gesture she had perfected since moving in. "My family reunion, obviously. The Millers. I told you about this like a month ago. Don't tell me you forgot. That would be so concerning." She was gaslighting me. Again, she hadn't said a word. "You never mentioned a reunion, Chloe. How many people?" "Like 30? Maybe 35 if Uncle Rick brings his new girlfriend," she said breezily, grabbing a bottled water from the fridge. My fridge. "Anyway, they're all staying here. Hotels are a total ripoff during festival season, and we have the space. But here's the kicker." She paused, taking a dramatic sip of water, waiting for me to bow down and accept my fate. "Mom and Dad need the master suite." She dropped the bomb casually, like she was asking for salt. "They have bad backs, and that mattress in the guest room is trash. So Brandon and I figured you could take the pull-out couch in the den for the week. It's only 7 days. You don't mind, right?" My blood ran cold. The master suite, my sanctuary, the room I shared with my late husband for 40 years. The room where I kept his urn on the mantle. She wanted to kick me out of my own bed in my own house to host the parents who raised this entitled brat? "You want me to sleep in the den?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "In my own house, while your parents sleep in my bed?" "Technically, it's our house, Eleanor," she scoffed, leaning against the island. "I mean, Brandon pays the internet bill, and we take care of the lawn. Plus, you're practically family to them. It's hospitality. Don't be so selfish. It's a bad luck." Selfish. The word hung in the air, heavy and toxic. I paid the mortgage. I paid the property taxes. I paid for the groceries she was currently eating. And I was selfish. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized this wasn't just entitlement, it was a takeover. Just then, Brandon walked in, adjusting his tie. He looked tired, or maybe just beaten down. He avoided my eyes immediately, heading straight for the coffee pot. "Brandon," I said, cutting through the silence, "Chloe says I'm sleeping in the den next week. Did you agree to this?" He winced, pouring coffee into a travel mug. "Mom, come on. It's just for a week. Chloe's parents are particular. We just want everything to go smoothly. Don't make a scene." "Make a scene," I repeated, feeling a laugh bubble up in my chest, a dark, cold laugh. I'm not making a scene, I'm clarifying the arrangement. You're inviting 30 strangers into my home without my permission and evicting me from my bedroom? Oh my God, you are being so dramatic. She threw her hands up. This is exactly why we need to look into other living arrangements for you, sooner rather than later. You're getting too old to manage a house this big anyway. It's clearly stressing you out. And there it was. The nursing home brochure I had found earlier wasn't a suggestion, it was their game plan. They were testing the waters, seeing how much they could push me before they shoved me out completely and took the deed. They thought I was a senile old lady they could bully into submission. They thought I was trapped. But as I looked at my son, the boy I raised, who was now too coward to look his mother in the eye, and his shark of a wife, something inside me shifted. The sadness evaporated, replaced with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I said fine. The word was simple, quiet. Chloe blinked, surprised by my sudden surrender. Fine? You'll do it? Yes, I lied, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. It's important to be hospitable. I'll move my things to the den tomorrow, and I'll start prepping the menu for the reunion. I want everything to be unforgettable. Chloe smirked at Brandon, a told you so look plastered on her face. See, I knew she'd come around. Thanks, Eleanor. Make sure you buy the organic ribeyes for the grill. Uncle Rick is keto. They walked out of the kitchen, chatting about their day, completely unaware that they had just signed their own warrant. They thought they had won. They thought they had broken me. But what they didn't know was that I had a lawyer on speed dial and a safety deposit box they knew nothing about. I wasn't just going to ruin their reunion. I was going to burn their entire little fantasy to the ground. And the best part? They gave me 7 whole days to prepare. As the front door slammed shut, I pulled out my phone. I didn't open the grocery app. I opened my banking app. It was time to make some moves. The moment the door clicked shut, the performance began. I wasn't just Eleanor, the pushover mother anymore. I was a woman on a mission, operating behind enemy lines in my own living room. Chloe thought I was subdued, beaten down by her relentless demands and superior attitude. She had no idea that while she was out picking up latte orders that cost more than my hourly wage used to be in the 80s, I was dismantling her future, brick by brick. For the next 2 days, I played the part of the doting, slightly confused grandmother to perfection. I nodded when Chloe explained for the 10th time that her family only drank alkaline water. I wrote down her ridiculous grocery list, which included things like activated charcoal lemonade and pasture-raised, emotionally supported chicken. I didn't roll my eyes once. I just said, "Of course, dear," and watched her smirk with that smug satisfaction of a predator playing with its food. "Make sure you clear out the hall closet, too," Chloe barked at me on Wednesday, tossing her keys on the counter. "My cousin Jessica is bringing her twins, and they need space for their stroller. You can put your winter coats in the garage in trash bags or something." "Trash bags?" I repeated, keeping my voice level. "Good idea. Keeps them safe from dust." "Exactly," she said, not catching the irony. "Oh, and Brandon needs you to sign for a package later. It's some new golf clubs. Don't open it. It's a surprise for his boss." Golf clubs. My son, who claimed he couldn't afford to pay rent or pitch in for the electric bill because they were saving aggressively for a house, was buying golf clubs? I watched her saunter off to the master bedroom, my bedroom, to measure for new curtains she planned to install after I was gone. That was the thing about Chloe. She wasn't just planning a party. She was planning a renovation. She had already started referring to the master bath as her spa. As soon as her car pulled out of the driveway an hour later for her nail appointment, I made my move. I didn't go to the grocery store. I went straight to the bank. I sat across from Mr. Henderson, the branch manager who had known my late husband for 20 years. He looked uncomfortable as he slid a stack of papers across the mahogany desk. "Eleanor, I'm glad you came in. I was actually going to call you. There was an inquiry on your account yesterday, someone trying to get authorized user access. They had your social, your mother's maiden name, everything. They just failed the voice verification phrase." My stomach dropped. "Who was it?" "It was done online, but the IP address matches your home service." "And, Eleanor, did you know about the second mortgage inquiry?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "Second mortgage? My house is paid off. I paid it off in 2015. "I know," Mr. Henderson said, looking pained, "but an application was started. It wasn't signed by you, but your name is on it, co-signed by Brandon." The room spun. They weren't just waiting for me to die or move to a home. They were trying to leverage my equity right now. They were trying to rob me blind while I slept under the same roof. My son, my own flesh and blood, manipulated by that woman, or maybe he was just as rotten as she was. It didn't matter anymore. The betrayal tasted like ash in my mouth. "Freeze it," I commanded, my voice shaking with the rage I hadn't felt in decades. "Freeze everything. Put a fraud alert on my credit. Lock down the title. If anyone tries to access a dime, I want the police called, not me. Consider it done." "But Eleanor, if they are this desperate, you need to be careful." "Oh, I'm not being careful, Frank. I'm getting even." I left the bank and drove to the hardware store, but not to buy cleaning supplies. I bought 3 heavy-duty padlocks and a hidden camera disguised as a smoke detector. If they wanted to play games, I was going to change the rules. When I got home, the house was empty. I went straight to the guest room, the one they were currently using, and started digging. I knew it was an invasion of privacy, but they had tried to mortgage my house behind my back, so as far as I was concerned, all bets were off. I found what I was looking for in a shoebox buried under a pile of Brandon's hoodies in the closet. It wasn't savings bonds. It was bills. Final notices. Credit card statements for cards I didn't know they had. Neiman Marcus, Nordstrom, online gambling sites. They were drowning in debt. Over $80,000 of consumer debt. That's why they needed the reunion to be perfect. That's why they needed the house. They were broke. They were putting on a show for her wealthy family, hoping to maybe snag a loan from Uncle Rick, or just keep up the charade long enough to steal my equity and bail themselves out. I took photos of every single document with my phone. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I had the evidence. I had the motive. And in 4 days, I would have the audience. I heard the garage door rumble open. They were home. I quickly shoved the box back, smoothed the clothes, and hurried to the kitchen. When Chloe walked in, laden with shopping bags from the mall, I was standing at the sink, peeling potatoes. "Did you get the organic kale?" she asked without looking at me. "Not yet," I said, forcing a sweet, senile smile. "I was just thinking about how lovely it will be to have everyone here. I really want to help you make this memorable." "Good," she dismissed me, dropping her bags on the table. "Just make sure you stay out of the way when the guests arrive. We don't want you hovering." "Oh, don't worry, Chloe," I muttered under my breath as she walked away. "I'll be the main event." Friday morning hit the house like a Category 5 hurricane, but I was the calm eye in the center of the storm. While Chloe was screaming at a florist on the phone because the hydrangeas weren't the exact shade of periwinkle she envisioned. I was quietly sipping my coffee and finalizing the details of their destruction. The house was buzzing with manic energy. Brandon was pacing the hallway, looking like he was about to throw up, his face a mask of sheer panic. It was showtime minus 24 hours, and I wasn't planning a party. I was planning a social execution. I spent the morning in the kitchen, prepping the welcome appetizers Chloe had demanded. She wanted prosciutto-wrapped melon balls and artisanal crackers that cost more than my weekly grocery budget used to be. As I sliced the melon, I listened to her on the phone in the living room. She was bragging to her friend, likely one of those frenemies she hated but tried to impress. "Oh, totally," she laughed, that high-pitched fake laugh that grated on my last nerve. "Yeah, we're thinking of putting in a pool next summer. Brandon's business is just booming. And the house? Yeah, we might extend the patio. It's great having so much equity to play with." I nearly sliced my finger. Equity. She was already spending money she didn't have based on a loan she couldn't get because I had locked down the title. It was delusional. It was pathetic. At noon, Brandon cornered me in the pantry while I was looking for the fancy olive oil. He looked ragged, dark circles under his eyes, sweat on his upper lip. He closed the pantry door behind him, trapping us in the smell of dried spices and impending doom. "Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking, "I need a favor, a big one." Here it comes, I thought. The asked. "What is it, honey?" I asked, putting on my best concerned mother face. "Is it about the party?" It's the caterer," he stammered, avoiding my eyes. "They want the final payment in cash upon arrival tomorrow. Their card reader is down. I forgot to go to the bank, and with the weekend—" Liar. The caterer didn't want cash. Brandon's credit cards were maxed out. I knew because I had seen the declined transaction alerts on his phone when he left it on the counter earlier. He was broke. Flat broke. "Oh, Brandon," I sighed, patting his cheek. "You know I live on a fixed income. I don't keep thousands of dollars in cash lying around." I know," he pleaded, grabbing my hand. "But maybe you have that emergency fund. Dad's old account. I swear, Mom, I'll pay you back Monday. It's just a liquidity issue. Please, Chloe will kill me if the food doesn't show up. Her family, they judge everything." He was begging his mother for money to feed the people who were helping him steal my house. The irony was so sharp, it almost drew blood. I looked at him, searching for the little boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard. He was gone. In his place was a desperate, spineless man who would sell me down the river for a pat on the head from his wife. "I can't help you, Brandon," I said firmly. "I moved that money into a CD last week. It's locked up." His face fell. Panic set in. "Mom, you have to do something. This is humiliating." "Maybe you should ask Chloe's parents," I suggested innocently. "Their family, they'd understand." "No," he hissed. "We can't ask them. You don't get it." "No, I guess I don't," I said, pushing past him. I had to get back to the melon balls. Chloe said the aesthetic is crucial. Later that afternoon, the guests started tripling in early. Uncle Rick, the one with the keto diet and the supposed deep pockets, arrived in a rented convertible that screamed midlife crisis. He walked in like he owned the place, tossing his keys on my antique foyer table without a coaster. "Nice place, Brandon," Rick boomed, looking around critically. "A bit dated on the decor, though. Needs some modernizing. Open concept, maybe?" "That's exactly what we were thinking," Chloe chirped, hanging on his arm. "Knock down this wall, open up the kitchen. It's in the plans for next year." I stood in the doorway of the kitchen, wiping my hands on my apron. I was invisible to them, just the help, just the old woman who came with the real estate. "And this must be Ellen?" Rick asked, squinting at me. Eleanor, I corrected. Brandon's mother. I own the house. The room went silent for a microsecond. Chloe's smile faltered. She shot me a glare that promised retribution later. Right, Brandon jumped in, nervous sweat glistening on his forehead. Mom lives here with us. She helps out. Helps out, Rick chuckled. Good to have a live-in nanny. Keeps the cost down, eh? They all laughed. Brandon laughed. Chloe laughed. I smiled. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through their chuckles, I prepared a special welcome presentation for everyone tomorrow night, before dinner. Just a little something to celebrate the family coming together. Chloe's eyes narrowed. What presentation? We didn't discuss this. Oh, don't worry, dear, I said, turning back to the stove. It's a surprise. A slideshow, old memories. You know how sentimental us old folk gets. Fine, Chloe snapped, clearly annoyed, but too distracted by Rick's presence to fight me. Just keep it short. We have a schedule. Oh, it will be memorable. Very memorable. That night, as I lay on the lumpy pull-out couch in the den, listening to Chloe and Brandon laugh with their family in the living room, drinking my wine, eating my food, sitting on my furniture, I pulled my laptop onto my chest. I had the USB drive ready. I had the bank statement scanned. I had the foreclosure notice I found in the trash that they thought I hadn't seen. I wasn't just showing baby pictures. I was going to give a PowerPoint presentation on financial fraud, betrayal, and the reality of their success. The den door creaked open. It was Brandon. He looked silhouetted against the light from the hallway. Mom, he whispered, we need more ice. Can you run to the store? It was 11 p.m. I was 65 years old. Go get it yourself, Brandon, I said into the darkness. Mom, don't start, he hissed. Uncle Rick likes his scotch on the rocks. Just go. He threw a $10 bill on the floor. It fluttered down and landed near my slippers. That was it. That was the seal on his fate. Sure, I said, picking up the bill. I'll go. I didn't go to the grocery store. I drove to the 24-hour copy shop. I had some handouts to print for my presentation. If they wanted a show, they were going to get a blockbuster. I printed 20 copies of a dossier I titled The Truth. When I got back, the house was finally quiet. I crept into the living room, stepped over the empty wine bottles, and plugged my USB drive into the back of the massive smart TV. I tested the remote. It worked perfectly. Tomorrow, the Millers were going to have a reunion they would talk about for the rest of their lives. Saturday morning dawned with the kind of chaotic energy that usually precedes a natural disaster. By 8 a.m., my living room had been transformed into a Pinterest nightmare. There were balloons and shades of beige and cream, because apparently colors were tacky, and a banner that read Miller Family Legacy hung crookedly over the fireplace. Chloe was running around in a silk robe, barking orders at Brandon, who looked like he hadn't slicked in a week. He was trying to hide the dark circles under his eyes with concealer he'd definitely stolen from Chloe's makeup bag. It was pathetic, but I didn't feel a shred of pity. I just sipped my coffee from a mug that said, World's Okayest Grandma, a passive-aggressive gift from Chloe last Christmas, and watched the train wreck unfold. Eleanor, move, Chloe snapped as she breezed past me with a tray of crystal flutes. You're in the way of the flow, and please tell me you weren't wearing that. She gestured vaguely at my navy blue pantsuit. I had bought it years ago for a board meeting, back when I ran my own department, back before I was reduced to an unpaid servant. It was sharp, professional, and commanded respect. Everything Chloe hated. I look fine, Chloe, I said, smoothing the lapel. It's a special occasion. I wanted to look my best for the presentation. She rolled her eyes so hard, I thought they might get stuck. Just don't stand near the photos. You'll clash with the aesthetic. Go check on the ice. Brendan forgot to buy more because he's incompetent. By noon, the invasion had begun. The Miller clan descended on my house like a swarm of locusts in designer sunglasses. There were about 30 of them, loud, entitled, and completely oblivious to the fact that they were walking on thin ice. Uncle Rick was the first to offend, walking straight in with muddy shoes on my Persian rug. "Great spread, kid," he spoomed, slapping Brandon on the back so hard the poor boy nearly collapsed. "Though I gotta say, the lawn looks a bit parched. You guys need to invest in a better sprinkler system." Brandon forced a laugh, his eyes darting nervously to the caterer's van pulling into the driveway. "Yeah, Uncle Rick, we're on it. Just waiting for the right contractor." I watched from the kitchen doorway as the caterer, a burly guy named Tony, cornered Brandon near the garage. I didn't need to be a lip reader to know what was happening. Tony was holding a clipboard and tapping it impatiently. Brandon was doing the pockets pat-down dance, looking for a wallet that I knew was empty. I saw Brandon whisper something, pleading, and Tony shook his head, crossing his massive arms. It was the moment of truth. Brandon glanced back at the house, at the laughing relatives, at Chloe posing for selfies by the balloon arch. He looked trapped. He pulled out his phone and made a frantic call, probably to a loan shark or a friend he hadn't alienated yet. Whatever he did, Tony eventually nodded, looking annoyed, and started unloading the trays. Brandon walked back inside looking like he'd aged 10 years. "Grandma, fetch me a soda," a teenage boy I didn't recognize shouted from the couch, not even looking up from his phone. He had his feet, shoes and all, propped up on my coffee table. My blood boiled, but I kept my cool. "The sodas are in the cooler outside. And get your feet off the table before I chop them off." He looked up startled, but I was already walking away. I had bigger fish to fry. Dinner was served at 6 p.m. It was an elaborate affair, paid for with money they didn't have to impress people who didn't care. Chloe sat at the head of the table, my table, holding court. She told stories about their upcoming trip to the Maldives and how Brandon was closing a massive deal in tech. The lies flowed out of her mouth like wine. Every time she spoke, I touched the USB drive in my pocket. It was cool metal against my skin, a promise of justice. And finally, Chloe stood up, tapping a spoon against her glass. The room fell silent. "I just want to say how blessed we are to have this beautiful home, this amazing family, and the means to bring us all together. To the Millers! To the Millers!" everyone shouted, raising their glasses. Brandon looked like he was going to be sick. He barely touched his champagne. "Now," Chloe continued, her smile tight, "Brandon's mom, Eleanor, insisted on showing a little slideshow. She's gotten very into scrapbooking lately. So let's just humor her for 5 minutes before dessert." Patronizing laughter rippled through the room. "5 minutes, Mom," Brandon hissed at me as I walked toward the TV. "Don't embarrass us." "Oh, I won't embarrass you, Brandon," I whispered back, my voice steady. "I'm going to liberate you." I stood in front of the massive 65-inch screen. The room was dim, illuminated only by the flicker of candles and the glow of the TV. 30 pairs of eyes stared at me, some bored, some amused, some annoyed that the flow of wine had stopped. I looked at Chloe, who was checking her reflection in her spoon. I looked at Uncle Rick, who was picking his teeth. And finally, I looked at Brandon, my son, who was sweating through his dress shirt. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice projecting clearly without a microphone. Chloe is right. I did insist on this presentation because there are some things about this family and this house that I think you all deserve to know. Transparency is so important, don't you think? I pulled the remote from my pocket. Chloe frowned, sensing a shift in the vibe. "Eleanor, just play the photos. Nobody wants a speech." "Oh, these aren't just photos, dear. This is an audit." I pointed the remote at the screen and pressed the big red button. The screen went blank for a second, and then the first slide appeared. It wasn't a baby picture. It wasn't a vetting photo. It was a blown-up, high-definition scan of a foreclosure notice with Brandon and Chloe's names highlighted in neon yellow. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Shall we begin?
"What is this?" Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking like a cheap wine glass. She lunged toward the TV, but she was on the other side of the crowded room, blocked by her own confused relatives. "Turn it off! Brandon, turn it off! She's hacked the TV!" "I didn't hack anything," I said calmly, holding the remote high like a torch of liberty. "I just pressed play. Next slide." I clicked the button. The image shifted from the foreclosure notice to a series of credit card statements. I had highlighted the juicy parts in bright yellow. Neiman Marcus, $4,500. DraftKings, $12,000. Mercedes-Benz lease payment, overdue, $900. The room gasped collectively. It was a beautiful sound, like air leaving a punctured tire. "You see?" I addressed the room, keeping my voice steady and authoritative. "Chloe told you all that Brandon's business is booming. She told you they were investing in a pool. But the reality is, my son has been unemployed for 6 months, and Chloe hasn't worked a day in her life since she married him. They are living off credit cards opened in my name, and they are currently $80,000 in debt." "That's a lie," Brandon shouted, finally finding his voice. He stood up, knocking his chair over. His face was a mask of sheer terror. "Mom, stop. You're ruining everything. This is just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I clicked to the next slide. It was the unauthorized mortgage application they had tried to file on my house 2 days ago, the one I had frozen at the bank. "Is this a misunderstanding, Brandon? Trying to take a second mortgage on a house you don't own? Forging my signature?" Uncle Rick stood up slowly. The jovial, loudmouth uncle was gone. In his place was a businessman who realized he was being played. He walked over to the TV, squinting at the screen. That's a federal offense," he muttered. He turned to Brandon, his eyes hard. "You asked me for a $50,000 bridge loan yesterday, Brandon. You said it was for expanding your inventory. You don't have any inventory, do you?" Brandon opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked like a fish flopping on a dock. Chloe, realizing the ship was sinking, decided to throw the captain overboard. She turned on Brandon with the ferocity of a cornered rat. "You told me you handled the finances," she screamed, showing his chest. "You said we were fine. You said the business was making profit. I bought those bags because you said we could afford them." "Oh, stop it, Chloe," I cut in, clicking to the next slide. It was a screenshot of a text thread I had recovered from an old iPad she left logged into. It was a conversation between Chloe and her best friend, Jessica. "Chloe, the old hag is totally clueless. Once the reunion is over, we're putting her in Shady Pines. I can't wait to turn her bedroom into my yoga studio. She's such a burden." The room went from shocked to horrified. Jessica, the cousin who was currently sitting in the corner, turned beet red and buried her face in her hands. The rest of the family looked at Chloe like she was a monster, which, to be fair, she was. You went through my private messages?" Chloe hissed, her eyes wild. "That is an invasion of privacy. I can sue you." "You can try," I said, stepping forward, "but lawyers cost money, honey, and as we've just established, you don't have any." I turned to the guests, who were now standing awkwardly, holding their half-eaten appetizers. "I apologize for the disruption," I said, smoothing my pantsuit, "but I couldn't let you all continue to be deceived. You were invited here under false pretenses. There is no Miller family legacy being built here. There is just a couple of grifters trying to impress you so they can borrow money to pay off their gambling debts." "This is insane," a woman in the floral dress muttered, grabbing her purse. "I'm leaving." "Me too. This is trashy. Come on, kids." The exodus began. It was glorious. They didn't even say goodbye to Chloe or Brandon. They just shuffled out, muttering apologies to me and shooting disgusted looks at the happy couple. Uncle Rick was the last to leave. He stopped in front of Brandon, shook his head, and said, "Don't call me, ever." Then he looked at me, tipped his imaginary hat, and walked out the door. Within 5 minutes, the house was empty of guests. The balloons looked sad and deflated. The expensive food was untouched. It was just me, Brandon, and Chloe, standing in the wreckage of their social lives. Chloe was hyperventilating near the fireplace. Brandon was slumped in a chair, head in his hands. "You're happy now, Brandon," he whispered, looking up at me with tearful eyes. "You humiliated us. You destroyed my life." "No, Brandon," I said, cold as ice. "I didn't destroy your life. You did. I just turned on the lights." "Get out," Chloe screamed suddenly, grabbing a vase and throwing it at the wall. It shattered, sending shards of glass everywhere. "Get out of my house, you crazy old witch. I want you gone tonight." I laughed, a deep belly laugh that felt amazing. "Your house? Oh, sweetie, you really aren't listening, are you?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a slide. It was a legal document I had picked up from my lawyer that morning. "This," I waved the paper, "is a formal eviction notice. Since you two don't pay rent, don't pay bills, and try to defraud the homeowner, me, you represent a liability. But because I'm a nice mother, I'm not kicking you out tonight." Their eyes widened with a glimmer of hope. "I'm giving you 48 hours, I said, checking my watch. "If you and your stuff aren't gone by Sunday at noon, the sheriff will be here to remove you. And I've already sent copies of the fraud evidence to the district attorney. So, if I were you, I'd spend less time screaming and more time packing." Chloe looked like she was having a stroke. You can't do that. We have rights, squatters' rights." "Actually," I smiled, walking toward the stairs to go to my bedroom, "in Texas, when you threaten the homeowner and commit financial fraud against them, those rights tend to evaporate. Checkmate, kids." I walked up the stairs, the sound of Chloe sobbing and Brandon's pathetic apologies to her echoing in the hallway. I didn't look back. I had a master's suite to reclaim. But the war wasn't over yet. They still had 48 hours to try something stupid, and knowing them, they absolutely would.
I slept like a baby that night. Well, a baby who had wedged a heavy oak chair under the doorknob and kept a canister of pepper spray on the nightstand. Downstairs, the sounds of World War III raged on until about 3 a.m. I heard sobbing, glass breaking, and Brandon pleading. It was music to my ears. When I woke up on Saturday morning, the silence in the house was heavy, but the air felt cleaner. I showered in my bathroom, used my towels, and dressed in comfortable clothes. I had a busy weekend ahead, supervising the exodus of the parasites. When I went downstairs, the living room looked like a frat house after a rager. Half-eaten shrimp cocktails were melting into the rug, and the Miller Family Legacy banner was ripped in half on the floor. Brandon was asleep on the couch, still wearing his suit from the night before, looking like a disheveled corpse. Chloe was nowhere to be seen, likely hiding in the guest room, plotting her next delusion. I didn't tiptoe. I went straight to the kitchen and started clanging pots and pans. "Rise and shine," I yelled, banging a wooden spoon against a skillet. "T-minus 28 hours, people. Chop, chop." Brandon jolted awake, falling off the couch. He looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "Mom, please, my head is splitting." "Not my problem," I said, brewing a fresh pot of coffee just for me. "You have a lot of packing to do. And remember, if you take anything that belongs to me, towels, silverware, that mixer Chloe loves, I'm adding theft to the list of charges I give to the DA on Monday." Chloe appeared at the top of the stairs looking like a specter. Her mascara was smeared down her cheeks, and she was wearing one of my silk robes. The audacity. "Take that off," I commanded, pointing a spoon at her. "Now." She glared at me but didn't move. "We're not leaving, Eleanor. I looked it up. You have to give us 30 days notice. It's the law. We're tenants." I used my encyclopedia knowledge to quickly take down her argument. You were tenants until you committed felony fraud and identity theft against the landlord. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, filed an emergency protective order this morning. It bypasses the 30-day rule when there is a threat to the homeowner's financial or physical safety. And considering you tried to mortgage my house out from under me, the judge agreed that you are a massive threat. So, unless you want to be escorted out in handcuffs, I suggest you start folding your yoga pants. Chloe's face went pale. The legal expert act crumbled instantly. She stomped back to the guest room and slammed the door. The rest of Saturday was a blur of passive-aggressive chaos. They didn't pack, they just argued. I sat on the patio, drinking iced tea and watching them through the sliding glass door like it was a reality show. At one point, I saw Chloe trying to shove her collection of designer shoes into a garbage bag because they didn't have enough suitcases. It was poetic justice. Sunday morning arrived, the deadline looming like a storm cloud. Noon, that was the cutoff. By 10 a.m., there were only a few boxes by the door. They were stalling. They thought I would cave. They thought, oh, it's Mom, she won't actually kick us out on the street. At 11:45 p.m., I made a phone call. Not to the movers, but to the sheriff's department. I had arranged this as a backup, just in case. When the patrol car rolled into my driveway at 11:58 p.m., the look on Brandon's face was worth every penny of my legal fees. 2 officers stepped out, big guys, no nonsense. They knocked on the door. Mrs. Eleanor? That's me, I smiled, opening the door wide. These are the trespassers I told you about. Brandon ran to the door, hands up. Officers, this is a mistake. We live here. This is a domestic dispute. Sir, we have a court order here stating that you need to vacate the premises by 12 p.m. today. It is now 12:01. You are trespassing. You have 5 minutes to grab your essentials and leave, or we will arrest you. But we haven't packed everything, Chloe shrieked, running into the hallway. We have furniture. We have beds. You can hire a moving company to collect your property later under police supervision. Right now, you leave. Bodies out. Now. The next 10 minutes were the most satisfying of my life. I watched as my son and his wife frantically stuffed clothes into pillowcases. Chloe was crying hysterically, screaming that I was evil and heartless. Brandon just looked defeated. A man who realized he had bet on the wrong horse and lost the farm. They walked out the front door carrying trash bags of clothes, looking like refugees from their own bad decisions. The neighbors were watching. Mrs. Higgins across the street, who Chloe had insulted last month about her gardening, was standing on her porch with the grin, sipping lemonade. Where are we supposed to go? Brandon asked, standing by his leased BMW that was probably about to be repossessed too. Mom, we have no money for a hotel. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. Well, I hear Uncle Rick has a big house. Or maybe you can stay with Chloe's parents. Oh, wait, you told them you were rich, didn't you? That might be an awkward conversation. You're enjoying this, Chloe spat, wiping her nose. You have no idea. You took my kindness for weakness for 3 years. You tried to steal my home. You treated me like a servant. This isn't me enjoying it. This is me balancing the scales. Now, get off my property before the officer puts you in the back of that cruiser. They got into the car, the engine sputtered, low on gas no doubt, and they peeled out of the driveway, disappearing down the street. The officers nodded at me and left. I stood there in the silence of my empty, beautiful home. The Miller family legacy was over, the balloons were sagging, the house was a mess. But it was my mess. And for the first time in forever, I felt completely, wonderfully free. But I wasn't done yet. There was one loose end left to tie up to ensure they never, ever came back. The moment the tail lights of Brandon's leased BMW disappeared around the corner, I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I picked up the phone and called a locksmith. By 2 p.m., every lock in the house had been changed. By 3 p.m., I had a professional cleaning crew, paid for with my own money, happily, scrubbing every inch of Chloe out of my home. They hauled out her tacky beige throw pillows, her expired organic kale, and that ridiculous live, laugh, love sign she had hung in the kitchen. I watched it all go into a dumpster, and I felt lighter with every trash bag that hit the bottom. But I knew that just kicking them out wasn't enough. As long as I was in this house, they would come sniffing back. They knew where I lived. They knew I was alone. They would try to guilt-trip me, send flying monkeys, aka relatives, to harass me or break in. So I decided to pull the ultimate power move. I called the real estate agent who had been leaving flyers in my mailbox for years. "I want to sell," I told her, standing in the middle of my silent, clean living room. "As is, cash offers only. I want to close in 2 weeks." The market was hot. I sold the house 3 days later to a nice young couple from California who offered $50,000 over asking price. I packed up my photo albums, my jewelry, and the few pieces of furniture I actually liked. Everything else, I sold it in an estate sale that I made sure to advertise on Facebook, knowing Chloe's nosy friends would see it. It was my way of letting them know that the Bank of Mom was permanently closed. 2 weeks later, I was sitting on the balcony of my new condo. It was a sleek, modern 2-bedroom downtown with a view of the skyline and 24-hour security. No lawn to mow, no guest room for freeloaders, just me and my peace. I got the update on the happy couple from Mrs. Higgins, my old neighbor, who called me to spill the tea. Apparently, Brandon and Chloe had driven straight to Chloe's parents' house, expecting to be welcomed with open arms. But word travels fast. Uncle Rick had already called Chloe's dad and told him everything: the fake job, the gambling debt, the attempted mortgage fraud. Chloe's parents didn't even let them in the front door. They left them standing on the porch with their trash bags. According to the grapevine, the stress broke them. Brandon and Chloe filed for divorce less than a month after the eviction. Brandon was currently sleeping on a friend's couch and delivering pizzas to make ends meet. Chloe had moved into a studio apartment with 3 roommates and was back to working retail, selling the same overpriced clothes she used to buy with my money. I took a sip of my Chardonnay, feeling the warm evening breeze on my face. I could have felt sorry for them. I could have felt that maternal tug to swoop in and save my son. But then I remembered the way he looked at me when he asked for money while I was sleeping on a pull-out couch. I remembered Chloe laughing about putting me in a nursing home, and the guilt evaporated. I reached for my iPad and opened my email. I had one final bit of business to attend to. My lawyer had drafted a letter to Brandon enclosing the bill for the broken vase, the professional cleaning fees, and the missing silver spoons Chloe had swiped. It wasn't about the money. I had plenty now from the house sale. It was about the principle. I hit send with a satisfied smile. Then I opened a new tab. Cruises for singles over 60. I had always wanted to see the Mediterranean. I booked the suite with the balcony, the expensive one. They wanted me to be a servant. They wanted me to be invisible. They wanted me to be a burden they could toss aside when they were done with me. Well, joke's on them. I'm not a servant. I'm a survivor. And while they're fighting over who gets to keep the debt, I'm going to be sipping mimosas in Santorini. If there's one thing I learned from this whole mess, it's that you teach people how to treat you. I taught them I was a doormat for too long. But in the end, I taught them a lesson they'll never forget. The hand that holds the checkbook rules the world. And this grandma just cashed out. So, if you have kids who think they're entitled to your life savings or a family that treats you like the help, take a page out of my book. Change the locks, sell the house, and go live your best life. Because the best revenge isn't anger, it's happiness. And honey, I am ecstatic. Thanks for listening to my story. If you enjoyed watching me take out the trash, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with anyone who needs a little backbone. Peace out.